Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and you're joining me today for another episode of Crime Writers of Canada's podcast, where we discuss crime fiction from authors from coast to coast, and occasionally, and probably we should do it more often, some nonfiction authors. So joining me today is Dean Jobb. Hi, Dean. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Eric.
And Dean is joining us from the opposite coast from me in the Atlantic region. So I'm glad you're being represented in the region.
Well, no, it's great. There's lots of CWC members out here, so happy to be waving the flag, I guess, from the East Coast.
So Dean is nominated for the Brass Knuckle Award for Best Nonfiction Crime Book, sponsored by David Reed Simpson Law Firm in Hamilton, with a prize of $300. The book that he's nominated for is A Gentleman and a Thief, a daring jewel heist of the Jazz Age Rogue, published by HarperCollins Publishers. A little bit about Dean. Dean writes historical true crime. His latest book, A Gentleman and a Thief, the story of a daring jewel thief who targeted the New York jazz age elite, is a national bestseller and a New York Times editor's choice. He's the author of The Case of the Murderous Dr. Cream, which recreates the hunt for a Victoria age Canadian doctor turned serial killer, and Empire Deception, the tale of a fugitive American swindler in the 1920s Nova Scotia. All three books are published by HarperCollins Canada. He has won the Crime Con and Crime Writers of Canada Award for Best True Crime Book and has been a finalist for the Hilary Weston Writers Trust Prize and the American Library Association's Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence. His monthly true crime column, Stranger Than Fiction, appears in Ellery Queen magazine, and he has written for Airmail, Crime Reads, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the Irish Times, and other publications. He is a professor at the University of King's College in Halifax, where he teaches Masters in Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction program. Find him at www.deanjob.com. I was just on your website, and I think you got another accolade for an award you won for this book too, right, Dean?
It's also nominated for the Richardson Award for Best Book of Nonfiction by a Nova Scotia writer.
And Crime Reads, I think, gave you a nod. If I'm
That's right. Yeah.
So it's not just us that loves you. So it's good to see. Um, I always sort of want to start this way. Could you tell us about your book and what inspired you to write about
Well, as you mentioned in the bio note, I'm drawn to historical true crime, and partly because I'm a true crime nut, obviously, but also that I like stories that illuminate the times, and I'm always on the lookout for larger than life characters, be it a Victorian era serial killer like Dr. Cream or a Chicago swindler that I profiled in Empire of Deception. And I happened upon the story of Arthur Berry. I hadn't heard of him. I was actually Googling Jazz Age con men, looking for either a story or potential book. And I found a Life magazine feature from the 50s on this guy. Arthur Berry was a prolific jewel thief of the 1920s in New York, something like $60 million in today's term. Jewelry, did everything from posing as a guest at swank parties in a tuxedo so he could case mansions to and then going back and grabbing a ladder and sneaking in and either sneaking in and out without being seen or confronting the house owners homeowners to find out where their jewels were. And Life magazine called him the greatest jewel thief of all time. And I thought, well, if this is true, this is a heck of a story. And what I found was arguably it is true. He had 7 year run of just unbelievable crimes, brazen heists. Stole from the Rockefellers, stole from royalty. He stole from the Mountbattens who were visiting Long Island in the 20s. And it's a whale of a tale that once he's actually caught, goes off in a whole other direction. So, without a spoiler alert, I won't go there. but turns out that, as I'd hoped, he really did illuminate the times.
have to admit, I'm with you. I've never heard of Arthur Berry before seeing your book, and then it's like, how did I not know this? So, um, you say right at the beginning, as a note to the reader, uh, actually, I'll quote you. While many of Arthur Berry's crimes are so audacious, they read like fiction. They are fact. Um, that's a hard thing to be sure of, but I know from nonfiction writers you love your research. So, what kind of research did you do for this?
Well, I'll give you an example. I lead off with him meeting the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VIII, who was visiting Long Island in the 20s. Barry crashes a party because there were a whole bunch of Long Island parties for the prince and his entourage, and ends up meeting the prince, takes him on a clandestine tour of the bright lights of Broadway and the speakeasies. And I mean, a writer, I think, has to go, really? Did this really happen? Well, start digging in. Reporters, I find memoirs or memories of reporters who covered the story, who vouch for it, who did their homework. The coverage makes it clear that the prince disappeared right at the time Barry says he was doing this. So it's a matter of digging as deeply as you need to in the record to verify for your own peace of mind, but you owe it to the reader. And if you're not sure, you tell the reader that. Likely Barry did something, but based on your research. What you don't do is embellish and add dialogue, and you don't add actions that you can't that aren't in the historical record. I talk about Barry sometimes slicking his hair back and straightening his tie. How do I know that? Well, he explained that in a short piece of memoir that I found. And so, matter of going back, especially to the best original sources, what was said in the 20s, because a story like this gets many layers of myth on it. So his exploits can get blown out of proportion or embellished. And again, it's to try to cut through and get as close to the real story as you can, and being able to verify everything you bring forward.
I think I read somewhere, probably your website, that it's sort of a mix of Catch Me If You Can mixed with The Great Gatsby. Catch Me If You Can is relatively newer. My question is, do you think there could be a modern Arthur Berry, or with security systems and everything like that, this is something that happened then, it can never happen again? Will there be
Well,
another
there,
Master Jewel Thief?
Well, there are in Barry's wake. I talk about this in the book. There were some other jewel thieves who adopted some of his methods. One thing that made him so fascinating was how meticulously he planned his robberies, how ingenious he was at finding rich people who were likely to have jewels at home, and then the time he spent casing their mansions, and just at one point he knew a neighbor in another mansion was away. So he simply pulled up a chair at a window and watched the neighboring house for weeks till he knew everybody's movements and knew when to strike. So some other jewel thieves since have adopted some of his methods. He may have actually picked up methods from others. Um, but in terms of today, it would be a little more difficult. But look what we just had Kim Kardashian jewel theft trial. And I mentioned that too. We've still got the ultra rich flaunting their bling. And that's what people were doing in the 20s. If the analogy to the Great Gatsby is, I mean, Barry was crashing the kinds of parties that Jay Gatsby, the fictional character, was throwing at his Long Island mansions. Barry is actually crashing them at the same time that Great Gatsby's being written. Um, so the bling, the jewels are there. People might be a little more careful. They might have security, but crooks can be pretty ingenious. So could he operate today? I think he'd have a little more difficulty, but then I think he would leverage social media. He would leverage
Mhm.
surveillance. Um, and I think instead of posing as a guest, maybe he'd pose as a guard. I think he would find another way to ply his trade, or I'd like to think so anyway.
Let's talk about some of your other projects. I just found this out and reading your bio and did a little bit of research. Stranger Than Fiction is a monthly true crime column that you write for Ellery Queen. Could you tell us what kind of features you write for them?
Well, I think everybody watching will be familiar with Ellery Queen's magazine, the venerable forum for short crime fiction. And a number of years ago, I discovered BoucherCon, actually. The editor was talking about what will lay ahead for Ellery Queen at one of the sessions and said she was interested in doing some true crime. So I reached out to her, and this was Janet Hutchins. And I ended up doing this monthly column. So every other month, 1 month it'll in alternation. For the print version that comes out every 2 months, I do an original true crime story, just something that piqued my interest. I like offbeat. I like unknown crimes and characters. These aren't books, but they're interesting little snippets. And then every other month, I do a review of latest some recent true crime, a roundup of true crime stories for the Ellery Queen's website.
Another project or a future project that you were kind enough to give us a sneak peek on is your next book. A lot of nonfiction authors don't want to tell us what they're work they're working on, but you told us that you are writing a murder in the cards. What could you tell us about that, and how long do we have to wait?
Well, it'll be a couple of years. I'm well into the writing and the research. It's the story of Joseph Elwell. And in 1920, he was found in his New York townhouse, single gunshot wound to the head. And it was a huge sensation. He was famous. He was the Hoyle. As Hoyle was to cards, Elwell was to the game of bridge. Elwell on Bridge was the definitive book about playing bridge. So he was a celebrity, very wealthy, lots of women friends. He had his own stables and was into racetrack gambling. He also gambled at cards. He was very good at bridge, obviously, and could win a lot of money at cards. And what it means is it's a suspect rich story. And I'm writing it like a real life whodunit because it hasn't been solved. And I do
Oh.
have a theory, and I will guide readers through the story. I'm recreating the story, but also assessing the weight of various theories that have emerged over the years. The story is still it's not really a locked room story because there's debate over whether he was locked in the room he was shot in, but it still has traction. It still attracts podcasters. It still attracts bloggers and true crime aficionados. So I want to delve into it. It's another great Jazz Age story, really at the cusp of the Jazz Age. It's really the transition from World War One, the Gilded Age, into the Roaring Twenties. And then, as if it needed more legs in my thinking, it actually became the inspiration for a book called The Benson Murder Case, which was then made into a movie. And it was the first crime novel by a forgotten but prolific crime writer of the 20s called S.S. Van Dyne. Um, David Niven played uh,
Oh.
Philo Vance, who was the detective, very much like a Lord Peter Wimsey kind of erudite, upper class detective who solves crimes. And so that transition, that real life story, inspiring
Hmm.
fiction, it will be a part of it too. And so I like that aspect of it.
That sounds fascinating. We have to wait. It
So
must be your
looking at
favorite time, research time, right?
looking at mid or fall 2027 for the release.
Excellent. Another last question, let's say. You said, in your bio, you teach a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction. What advice do you usually give your students?
Well, probably more than they want to hear sometimes. But well, the first thing I tell them is some people don't understand what creative nonfiction is. They think that's license to embellish. Creative nonfiction is the creative part is the storytelling, not the facts, not the it's the way you tell a story. It's telling the story thinking like a novelist, not inventing or imagining like a novelist, but looking for dialogue, creating scenes, and um, and fleshing out characters to make them real, to make the past or the story come alive. And the only way you can do that and be faithful to the historical record is to do a lot of research. So if you don't know what the room looked like, if you can't find photos, if there's no description, you describe other things. You describe what you can find. And that means when I tell the reader that a bow tie was blue, I'm not making that up. That's because some reporter noted that in a court report or a police report. Or if I describe a scene, that's because I have a vintage photograph. And I think it's important to be totally accountable. So I have dozens and dozens of pages of endnotes. They don't intrude on the narrative, but if anyone wants to doubt me, I do explain where everything comes from, and I think that's important. So that's what that a kind of accountability, but also that for students is just that you don't need to make it up. You know, David Grann, a writer I admire, a writer of author of Killers of the Flower Moon and The Wager, attended virtually, did a virtual session for our students, and he said the role of the writer in nonfiction is to do all the research and then get out of the way and let the story tell itself, and that's really sage advice. So find all the material you can, and then you don't have to narrate it. You can recreate the story and let the story tell itself.
Yeah, I've only read the beginning so far of your story, and it's the Prince of Wales is here, and it's like you said, it's bigger than life. It's like, how did this really happen? And so, thank you so much. And when you said David Grand, it rang a bell, and now I remember because it was on your website. He says you're the master of narrative nonfiction. So high praise from.
I'm grateful for that. Yes.
All right. I tell this to everyone. I do not know the results of the awards yet. It's coming out soon, but I could wish everyone I talk to the very best of luck. I could wish you that. I'm so happy that three authors are nominated in your category from Crime Writers of Canada. It's been great chatting with all of you, and thank you so much, Dean, for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thanks so much for this, Eric.